My daughter forgot to hang up the phone. I heard her say he has to go to a nursing home. They sold the house for $950,000 and came back. When they found a note and read it, they screamed. It's funny how a home can become a part of you. This old house, tucked away on a leafy street in a quiet corner of Austin, Texas, is more than just wood and drywall to me. It's a living scrapbook. I can still see my late wife, Eleanor, standing right there by the big bay window, humming to herself as she watered her African violets. I can feel the worn spot on the arm of my leather recliner, the one my thumb has traced 1,000,000 times over 40 years of watching the evening news. Every creak in the floorboards is a familiar old friend. When Eleanor passed 2 years ago, the house became my last, best connection to her. The silence was deafening at first, but slowly the memories living in these walls started talking to me, keeping me company. At 78, I was lonely. There's no denying that. But I wasn't helpless. That all started to change after my fall. It wasn't anything dramatic. I was reaching for the good olive oil on the top shelf of the pantry, maybe a little too confidently, and the step stool wobbled. I landed hard on my hip. Nothing broken, thank heavens, just a nasty bruise and a lesson in humility. But for my daughter Jessica and her husband Mark, that little incident was like the starting gun at a race. That's when their concern kicked into overdrive. Their visits, once a pleasant Sunday afternoon affair, became frequent and agenda-driven. They'd show up unannounced on a Tuesday morning, their arms full of groceries I didn't need, and cleaning supplies that smelled of chemicals, not home. "We were just in the neighborhood, Dad," Jessica would chirp, her smile a little too bright. "Thought we'd check in." Mark would trail behind her, his eyes doing a slow scan of the room, like an appraiser, not a son-in-law. "Place is looking good, Robert," he'd say, but his tone was always off. "Lot of upkeep for one person, though, huh? That lawn isn't going to mow itself." Their conversations were a masterclass in manipulation, always circling the same drain. "Dad, are you sure you're eating properly?" Jessica would ask, peering into my perfectly respectable refrigerator. "We worry you're not getting enough nutrition." Or, "That third step on the porch is a little loose. What if you trip, Dad, at night?" There'd be no one around to help. It was condescending. Every word was wrapped in the language of love and care, but it felt like they were slowly, methodically, stripping away my competence, painting me as a doddering old fool who couldn't be trusted to live in his own home. They treated me like a child. And the worst part was, I could see the end game. They'd bring it up casually, dropping little bombs into the conversation. "You know, the Hendersons down the street sold their place and moved into that new community, Azure Skies. Said it was the best decision they ever made. No more leaky faucets or property taxes, just simplified living." Simplified living. The phrase dripped with a sweetness that turned my stomach. What they meant was a sterile, one-room apartment with a communal dining hall and bingo on Tuesdays. They wanted to tear me away from Eleanor's rose bushes, from the pencil mark on the kitchen doorframe where we measured Jessica's height every year, from the very air that still held the ghost of my wife's perfume. The last visit had been particularly trying. They'd spent 2 hours helping me. Mark had fixed the wobbly leg on the kitchen table, a task I was planning to do myself that weekend, and he did it with a sigh so performative it deserved an award. Jessica had reorganized my pantry, putting my favorite cookies on a high shelf I couldn't easily reach. "Just helping you make healthier choices, Dad," she'd trilled. When they finally left, the relief I felt was so immense it was almost physically painful. I watched their car pull away from the curb and let out a long breath. The house settled back into its comfortable quiet. I sank into my recliner, the familiar leather groaning a welcome. A few minutes passed. I reached for my phone on the side table just to check the time and see how long I had before the evening news started. But the screen was lit up. It showed an active call. "Jessica." The timer was at 2 minutes and 14 seconds. She must have hit the call button again by accident when she put the phone in her purse. She'd forgotten to hang up. A part of me knew I should just disconnect. It was a private conversation. But a stronger, colder curiosity took hold. I was tired of the whispers, the knowing looks, the feeling that I was being managed. I lifted the phone to my ear, my hand trembling slightly. Jessica's voice came through, but it was nothing like the cheerful, overly solicitous tone she used with me. It was tight, hushed, and raw with frustration. "Taking too long, Mark," she was saying, the words sharp and brittle. "It's just taking too long. He's more resilient than we thought. He has to go to a nursing home. We can't let this drag on." The air in my lungs turned to ice. My heart gave a painful lurch, then started hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Resilient. She said it like it was a character flaw. She said it like my ability to keep living my life was an obstacle. Then came Mark's voice, smooth and confident. He was the anchor, the one keeping her focused on the prize. "I know, Jess. I know it's frustrating. But you just have to stick to the plan. Be patient. Don't push him so hard he gets suspicious. Just stick to the plan. That realtor said we could get close to $1 million for it. Think about what we could do with that money, babe. Just think. $1 million. The number hung in the air between us, a monstrous, ugly thing. It wasn't about my safety. It was never about me being a burden. It was about the house. It was about the money. This home, this vessel of my entire life, of my marriage, of my love for a daughter who was now plotting to dispose of me, was nothing more to them than a winning lottery ticket. My fingers went numb. The phone slipped, clattering onto the wooden floor. But I barely heard it. All I could hear was the echo of my daughter's words and the sound of my own heart breaking. A profound, bottomless grief washed over me, so strong it felt like Eleanor had died all over again. But then, as the shock receded, something else bubbled up from that deep, dark place. It was cold. It was quiet. It was a fury so pure and absolute that it sharpened all my senses. The betrayal was complete. They had already buried me. They were just waiting for me to lie down. I slowly bent over, picked up the phone, and with a click that felt as final as a slamming vault door, I ended the call. They had a plan. Fine. Now, so did I. The silence after I hung up was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was heavier than the grief that had settled in the house after Eleanor passed, thicker than the summer air in Austin. The betrayal wasn't a sharp stab. It was a cold, heavy poison seeping into my bones. He has to go to a nursing home. My own daughter. Close to $1 million for it. My son-in-law. My home, the place where I'd brought my bride, raised my child, and held my wife's hand as she took her last breath, was nothing more than a dollar amount to them. A jackpot they were waiting to hit. A firestorm of fury and sorrow raged inside me, but on the outside, I was perfectly still. My first instinct was to storm over to their house, to throw their words back in their faces and watch them squirm. But what good would that do? They'd deny it. They'd call me confused, paranoid. "Oh, Dad, you must have misheard. You know how your hearing isn't what it used to be." They would just twist the truth, gaslight me until I doubted my own sanity. No, a direct confrontation was what they'd expect. It was a losing game. If they wanted to play, we'd play. But we'd play by my rules. A plan, cold and precise, began to form in the ruins of my heart. If they wanted a frail, doddering old man who was a danger to himself, then that's exactly what I'd give them. The next Tuesday, Jessica came by with a bag of groceries I didn't need. I was making myself a cup of tea, my hands steady, my mind clear. As she bustled around the kitchen, putting away milk and bread, I waited for my moment. I turned the knob for the front right burner on our old gas stove, just enough to release a whisper of gas, but didn't light it. Then I busied myself with the kettle. A few minutes later, the faint, sickeningly sweet smell of gas began to permeate the air. Jessica's nose twitched. "Dad, do you smell that?" she asked, her voice sharpened with alarm. I feigned confusion, sniffing the air theatrically. "Smell what, honey?" Her eyes darted around the kitchen and landed on the stove. She lunged forward and twisted the knob off. "Dad, you left the gas on. You could have blown up the whole house. What were you thinking?" I looked at the stove, then back at her, letting my shoulders slump. I widened my eyes, trying to look lost and bewildered. "Oh my goodness! Did I do that? I was just getting the kettle. I don't remember even touching that knob." I let my voice quaver. "I'm so sorry, Jess. My mind's just, it's not what it used to be." She softened, her manufactured panic replaced by a look of patronizing pity. It was the exact look I'd been hoping for. "It's okay, Dad. It was an accident." But see, this is what Mark and I have been worried about. That evening, a glossy, trifold brochure for Golden Sunset Senior Living appeared on the coffee table, right next to Eleanor's favorite picture frame. It featured a smiling, silver-haired couple playing shuffleboard. It made my stomach turn. I escalated my performance. A few days later, I forgot my morning blood pressure medication. Jessica had made a habit of checking my weekly pill organizer, just in case, and her discovery was met with a dramatic gasp. "Dad, you didn't take your pills this morning. Your pressure could go through the roof. This is life and death." I just stared at my hands, mumbling about how I thought I'd already taken them. The next day, 2 more brochures appeared, one for Willow Creek Retirement Community and another for the Palms Assisted Living. They were multiplying like weeds. Mark, meanwhile, took on the role of the helpful, practical son-in-law. He started walking through the house with a thoughtful look on his face, his eyes scanning everything. "You know, Rob," he said one afternoon, tapping a finger on the heavy oak dining table Eleanor and I had bought at an estate sale 50 years ago. "This is a really solid piece, probably worth a good bit. All this old furniture, you know, it's a burden to have to worry about and dust all the time." Another time he picked up a small silver box Eleanor kept her sewing needles in. "This is probably real silver. We should get it appraised for you just to know what you've got. Take that worry off your plate." They weren't just selling my house, they were liquidating my life piece by piece, memory by memory. Each helpful suggestion felt like a vulture picking at my bones. I'd just nod meekly, a sad smile on my face. "Oh, you think so? Well, that's kind of you to think of, Mark." Inside, a cold, hard diamond of resolve was forming. The time had come to set my own plan in motion. I waited until they left, their car pulling away from the curb with a cheerful honk. I walked to the hall closet and pulled out an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside, beneath a stack of old photos, was my old flip phone, a dinosaur by today's standards, but it wasn't connected to any account they could track. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "David Chen, attorney at law," a familiar voice answered. "David, it's Robert Sterling." "Rob, good to hear from you, buddy. How are you holding up?" David had been our lawyer and friend for over 30 years. He'd handled our wills, the deed to the house, everything. He'd sat in our living room and mourned with me after Eleanor's funeral. If I could trust one person on this earth, it was him. "I'm managing," I said. "Listen, David, I need to see you, but not at your office. Can you meet me somewhere quiet?" The next morning we met at an old-school diner off the highway, the kind with red vinyl booths and chipped coffee mugs. I laid it all out for him. The overheard phone call, the campaign of manipulation, the brochures, Mark's talk of appraisals. As I spoke, David's friendly face hardened. The folksy lawyer I knew disappeared, replaced by a shark. "The greedy little monsters," he muttered, his fist clenching on the tabletop. "After everything you and Eleanor did for that girl." He took a deep breath. "Okay, Rob, okay. Tearing them a new one feels good, but it doesn't get you justice. You're right, we have to be smarter. We'll let them think they've won. We'll give them exactly what they want." And so we crafted the perfect trap. David spent 2 days drawing up a power of attorney document. "This is a specific power of attorney, Robert," he explained, pointing with his pen at the dense legal text. "It's not a blank check. It grants Jessica the legal authority for one, and only one, specific action, to act as your agent in the sale of the property at 452 Willow Lane. It expires the second the sale is final." He then tapped a paragraph on the 3rd page. And this is the beautiful part. This clause, right here, dictates that upon closing, the full proceeds from the sale are to be wired directly and irrevocably to a pre-designated beneficiary. They'll be so giddy about getting your signature, they'll never read this far. They'll just see power of attorney and sale of the house and start salivating. It was time for my command performance. That Saturday, when Jessica and Mark came for their weekly visit, I was ready. I sat hunched in my armchair, unshaven, wearing an old, stained cardigan. I didn't even look up when they came in. Jessica began her gentle, probing routine. "How are you feeling today, Dad? Did you sleep well?" I let out a long, shaky sigh that I'd rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked up at her, and the tears that filled my eyes weren't entirely fake. They were tears for the daughter I had lost. "I'm tired, Jessica," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm just so tired. You're right. You and Mark are right. I can't live like this anymore. I'm a danger to myself. I'm just a burden on you both." Jessica's eyes widened. She shot a look at Mark, a flash of pure, unadulterated triumph that she couldn't hide. It was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen. "Oh, Dad," she cooed, rushing to my side and taking my hand. Her touch felt like ice. "It's not about being a burden. It's about your safety. We just want what's best for you." "I know," I mumbled, pulling my hand away to wipe at my eyes. "It's time. I'll go to that Golden Sunset place. You can handle the house. Do whatever you need to do. Your lawyer, David, he sent over some papers for me to sign, to make it easier for you." It was almost comical how fast Mark found the envelope I had left on the hall table. They spread the documents on the dining table, their excitement a palpable, humming energy in the room. "It's just a standard power of attorney, Dad," Mark said, his voice slick and reassuring as he uncapped a pen. He was practically vibrating with greed. "It just lets Jess handle the sale for you, so you don't have to worry about a thing." They skimmed the first page, their eyes gliding right over the crucial clauses David had so carefully constructed. All they saw was their victory, spelled out in black and white. With a hand that I made tremble, I slowly, deliberately, signed my name on the line. I signed away my home. I signed away their inheritance. I signed their doom. They beamed, exchanging another one of those sickening, knowing glances. As they left that day, their faces alight with an almost manic glee, they promised to get a realtor on it first thing Monday morning. I stood at a window and watched them go, the legal documents clutched victoriously in Jessica's hand. The house was deathly quiet, but for the first time in months, it wasn't a lonely quiet. It was the calm, patient quiet of a trap being set. The speed at which everything happened was breathtaking. It was as if Jessica and Mark had lit a fuse, and now we were all just watching it burn down to the explosive finale. The house, my home of over 40 years, was transformed by a staging company into a sterile, impersonal catalog photo. Our family pictures were packed away. Eleanor's worn armchair was replaced by a sleek, uncomfortable-looking thing. And the scuffs on the floor that marked decades of life were hidden under strategically placed rugs. It sold in less than a week. A developer came in with an all-cash offer, no contingencies, for $950,000. Jessica and Mark were practically vibrating with excitement. They tried to hide it behind a mask of somber responsibility, of course. "It's a great offer, Dad," Mark had said, his hand on my shoulder, his grip a little too tight. "You won't have to worry about a thing now. This covers everything and then some." Jessica nodded, her eyes glistening, but not with tears of sadness. It was the frantic, shiny look of someone staring at a winning lottery ticket. The day they moved me into Golden Sunset Senior Living was a gray, drizzly Tuesday. The name was a cruel joke. The sun had set on this place long ago. The air inside smelled of disinfectant and overcooked cabbage, a scent that clung to the back of my throat. The floors were polished linoleum that squeaked with every footstep, and the walls were painted a pale, sickly shade of yellow that seemed to suck the very life out of the air. My room was small, with a single window overlooking a parking lot, a narrow bed, a particle board dresser, and a small armchair. That was it. Jessica busied herself unpacking my few belongings, placing Eleanor's photo on the nightstand with a cloying gentleness that made my stomach turn. "See, Dad? It's not so bad," she said, her voice bright and false. "You'll be safe here. 3 square meals a day, and there's bingo on Thursdays." I played my part to perfection. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hand tremble as I reached out for the photo of my wife. I looked around the sterile box of a room, my eyes wide and lost. It's just so quiet," I mumbled, letting a single, genuine tear for the home I'd lost roll down my cheek. It wasn't hard to find that sadness, it was real. But beneath it was a bedrock of cold, hard resolve. They left soon after, patting my arm and promising to visit next week. "We just have to finalize the paperwork with the house, Dad. Then we can relax," Mark said, practically sweating with anticipation. I watched them walk down the long, squeaky hallway, their heads close together, already whispering about their future. The moment their figures disappeared around the corner, I straightened my back. The act was over. My part was done. I can only imagine what happened next, but my lawyer David and I had rehearsed it so many times in my mind. It feels like I was there. They must have driven straight back to the house. The sale had closed that morning. The money was in escrow, ready to be transferred. They probably walked through the front door without even needing a key, just pushing it open into the echoing emptiness. I see them, clear as day, walking from room to room, their voices bouncing off the bare walls. The space where my recliner used to be, the kitchen where Eleanor taught Jessica how to bake. They wouldn't be seeing any of that. They'd be seeing the ghost of their future fortune. "I can't believe it, Jess," Mark would say, his voice booming in the empty living room. $950,000. We did it. "I told you," Jessica would reply, a smug, giddy laugh escaping her. "A new car for you. That trip to Tuscany for me. We can finally live a little." They would do a final sweep, just as I knew they would, checking closets for forgotten heirlooms, tapping walls for a non-existent safe. It was their greed that made them so predictable. And then they would see it. There, on the center of the wooden mantelpiece, right below the faint outline where our wedding portrait hung for 4 decades, was a single, crisp white envelope. On the front, in my old-fashioned, steady cursive, were 2 names, Jessica and Mark. I pictured Jessica snatching it up, an annoyed frown on her face. She'd be expecting a last, pathetic, guilt-inducing letter from her old dad. Something to spoil the perfect moment. She'd rip it open with an impatient tear, Mark peering over her shoulder. They'd read it together. The note wasn't long. I'd written it with David at my side, to make sure every word was a perfectly sharpened blade. "Dear Jessica and Mark, by the time you read this, the sale of our family home is complete. As per the specific, unalterable terms of the power of attorney you so eagerly had me sign, the full proceeds of $950,000 have been directly and irrevocably transferred to a trust benefiting the Children's Hospital Oncology Wing, a cause your mother always championed. Your inheritance and your windfall is gone. You sold my home to fund a miracle for sick children. I hope that brings you comfort. By the way, I'm checking out of Golden Sunset now. My real friends are taking me to my new apartment. Don't look for me." For a moment, there would have been nothing, just the silence of the empty house and the sound of their own breathing. The words wouldn't compute. It would be like reading a foreign language. They'd read it again, and then again. Mark's face would go pale, then blotchy red. Jessica's hands would start to shake, the paper rattling between her fingers. The realization would crash down, not like a wave, but like an entire building collapsing on top of them. The plans, the car, the vacation, the smug victory, all of it, turning to dust in an instant. They hadn't just lost the money, they had been played. They had been surgically, brilliantly, and completely outmaneuvered by the feeble old man they thought they'd so cleverly discarded. The note would flutter from Jessica's numb fingers, and then they would scream. It wouldn't be a yell of simple anger, it would be a raw, guttural, animal sound of pure, unadulterated rage and total loss. A shriek that filled every empty corner of the house they had just sold for nothing. Of course, here is part 4 of your story. I didn't hear their screams, of course. Not directly. By the time Jessica's manicured fingers were ripping open that envelope, I was miles away, sitting in the passenger seat of my lawyer David's comfortable Lincoln, watching the manicured lawns of my old neighborhood give way to the rumbling concrete of the interstate. The Golden Sunset Senior Living brochure was a crumpled ball in a gas station trash can 30 miles back. The only thing I felt as we drove was a profound, hollow quiet. It wasn't the quiet of victory, but the stillness that comes after a storm has passed, leaving destruction in its wake. I learned about the aftermath the next morning. I was in a small, clean kitchen in a corporate apartment David had arranged for me. trying to figure out how the fancy new coffee maker worked when my temporary cell phone buzzed. It was David. "Morning, Robert," he said. His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear a crackle of something else underneath. "Just wanted to check in. How are you settling in?" "It's quiet, David." "Feels strange, but good strange, I think." I looked out the window at a small park across the street where a young mother was pushing her child on a swing. Did it happen?" "Oh, it happened," David chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "The curtain has fallen and the actors are in absolute disarray. It played out even more spectacularly than we anticipated." I leaned against the counter, my knuckles white. "Tell me." "Well," he began, "according to my sources, and it pays to have sources in the title business, the first call came in at 5:17 p.m. It was Mark. Apparently, he was shouting so loud the receptionist held the phone a foot from her ear. Screaming about a gross error, a theft. He demanded they reverse the wire transfer immediately. The title agent, a very by-the-book woman named Brenda, calmly informed him that the transfer was executed in accordance with the explicit, notarized instructions in the power of attorney he and his wife had provided. It was, in her words, irrevocable. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I could picture Mark's face, usually so smug and condescending, turning purple with helpless rage. While Mark was having his meltdown with the title company, David continued, "Jessica was apparently trying to get a hold of you. The telecom provider logged 67 failed call attempts to your old number in the span of 30 minutes. When she finally realized it was disconnected, she moved on to the nursing home. The front desk nurse told her that Mr. Robert Anderson had been checked out by his legal representative approximately 2 hours prior, and they had no forwarding information. They were, as you can imagine, not pleased." I closed my eyes, picturing the echoing, empty rooms of my house. I imagined them standing there, the note trembling in their hands, the realization dawning not as a soft light but as a crashing wave. They hadn't just lost the money, they had been played. They, who thought they were the puppeteers, had been dancing on my strings the entire time. "They didn't give up, of course," David said. "They called their own lawyer, a guy who specializes in quick real estate closings, not complex estate law. They were in his office first thing this morning. He took one look at the copy of the POA you signed, told them it was the most ironclad, single-purpose, mission-specific document he'd ever seen. He pointed to the clause we buried on page 4, the one specifying the singular transaction and the designated beneficiary of the proceeds. Then he pointed to their own signatures at the bottom. He told them, and I quote my source, "You not only authorized this, you insisted on it. There's nothing I can do, you have no case." A shudder went through me, one that was equal parts relief and a strange, distant pity. "So that's it? It's over?" "Legally, yes. But Robert, this is where the real tragedy begins for them." David's voice lost its edge of professional satisfaction and took on a graver tone. I did a little more digging. It seems they were so certain of their impending windfall that they started making arrangements. Big ones. "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They quit their jobs, Robert. Both of them. Gave their 2 weeks' notice the day the house went on the market. Mark's last day was last Friday. Jessica's would have been this coming Wednesday. They told their colleagues they were retiring early to manage family investments. The sheer arrogance of it took my breath away. They hadn't just counted their chickens before they hatched. They had burned down the henhouse and sold the farm. "It gets worse," David said, "and I didn't think it was possible. In unleavened enthusiasm, they also gave their landlord a 60-day notice to vacate their apartment about a month ago. They'd already put down a hefty, non-refundable $50,000 deposit on a new custom-built house out by the lake. The check for that probably cleared last week. And that new Mercedes Mark was test driving, he'd placed the factory order. They spent almost all their actual savings on deposits for a life that was supposed to be funded by you." He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. The chaos I had imagined was no longer just a flash of anger, but a bonfire of their entire lives. "Yesterday afternoon, the property manager for their apartment building taped a notice to their door," David finished, his voice low. Just a friendly, formal reminder that their lease terminates in 28 days. They have no jobs, no savings, and nowhere to go. They didn't just lose their future, Robert. They incinerated their present. They're trapped. They argued all last night. The neighbors could hear it through the walls. He's blaming her for not reading the paperwork. She's blaming him for being so greedy. It's a mess. I hung up the phone and walked over to the window. The young mother was now pushing her laughing child higher and higher on the swing. It was a simple, beautiful moment. My daughter and her husband had been offered a world of those moments, a world built on love and family. Instead, they had chosen to gamble it all on a shortcut to a world of shiny, empty things. They had built their own cage, brick by expensive brick, and in their haste to lock me inside it, they had slammed the door on themselves. My new apartment isn't luxurious. There's no doorman, no marble lobby, no sprawling square footage. It's a simple, two-bedroom place in a quiet town a few hundred miles from Austin, with a big window in the living room that looks out over a small, green park. Kids fly kites there on windy afternoons, and older couples walk their dogs along the paved paths in the morning. It's peaceful. It's the opposite of the sterile beige box at Golden Sunset Senior Living, and it's a world away from the cavernous, echoing silence of the family home I no longer had. But for the first time in over a year, when I wake up in the morning, the air I breathe feels like my own. A few days after I settled in, a video call came through on the tablet David, my lawyer, had set up for me. The screen flickered to life, showing a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes sitting in an office. A nameplate on her desk read, Dr. Anya Sharma, Director. She was smiling, but her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. Mr. Vance, Robert, she began, her voice thick with emotion. I honestly don't know where to begin. We received the transfer this morning. When our finance department called me, I thought it had to be a typo. A donation of this magnitude? It's a miracle. I just nodded, my own throat feeling tight. It's no miracle, Dr. Sharma. It's just redirected funds. She shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't try to wipe it away. You don't understand, she said, leaning closer to her camera. We've been trying to get funding for a new pediatric oncology wing for 3 years. We have the plans, we have the staff, but we've been hitting brick walls trying to secure the capital for construction and equipment. What you did, this isn't just a donation, Mr. Vance. This is a building. This is a fully equipped treatment center. This is dozens of children who won't have to travel to Houston for specialized care. You've given families in our community a chance to stay together during the hardest time of their lives. I cleared my throat, looking away from the screen for a moment, toward the little side table next to my armchair. On it sat a silver-framed photo of Eleanor, taken on our 40th anniversary. She was radiant, her smile so full of life it felt like she could step right out of the frame. Her passion project, her life's cause after she retired from teaching, had been volunteering with children fighting cancer. She read to them, raised money, and sat with parents who just needed a hand to hold. My late wife, Eleanor, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She always said that hope was the best medicine. I'd like it, if it's possible, if the new wing could bear her name. Dr. Sharma let out a sound that was half a sob, half a laugh. The Eleanor Vance Hope Wing, she said, as if testing the words. Mr. Vance, it would be our profound honor. You've turned a gift into a legacy. An angel donation, that's what we're calling it. From an angel. We talked for a few more minutes, but I barely registered the words. An angel donation. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The money that was meant to fund a life of selfish indulgence, a new luxury car, a trip to Europe, a life of leisure built on the rubble of their father's home and heart, was now going to save children. The most cynical act I had ever witnessed had been transformed into the most beautiful legacy I could imagine. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my new living room for a long time, just looking at Eleanor's picture. There was no surge of victory, no feeling of triumph. I didn't feel like I had won. How could you win when the person you defeated was your own child? All I felt was a profound aching sadness and a sense of grim resolution. I had lost my daughter long before she sold my house. I lost her somewhere in the quiet corrosion of greed, in the moments she and her husband started seeing me not as a father, but as an obstacle between them and a number in a bank account. David, my lawyer, had insisted on giving me an update, despite my telling him I didn't need to hear it. He felt it was his duty to close the loop. "They're a wreck, Robert," he'd said over the phone, his voice flat and professional. "They're in a worse position than before." Apparently, they had been living well beyond their means for some time, completely convinced this windfall was just around the corner. They stopped paying their rent months ago, assuming they'd be in a new house by now. An eviction notice was served. He told me Mark had lost his job for his erratic behavior in the final weeks, consumed with the house sale. He told me they were blaming each other, the frantic partnership they'd shared in their scheme, now a toxic, venomous cycle of recrimination. They had not only failed to gain a future fortune, they had actively destroyed their present. They had grasped for $1 million and in doing so, had let the simple, stable life they already had crumbled to dust in their hands. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I allow myself to picture it. It's like a split screen in my mind. On one side, there's me. I'm sitting in my comfortable armchair, a warm mug of coffee in my hands, looking out the window as the sun sets over the park. I see the photo of Eleanor, and I feel a sense of peace. I know she would be proud, not of the revenge, but of the result. Proud that I took the ugliest parts of human nature, greed, deceit, betrayal, and spun them into pure, unadulterated hope for sick children. Then, on the other side of the screen, I see them, Jessica and Mark. They aren't laughing in my old living room anymore. They're sitting in the near darkness of their cramped, now barren apartment. Cardboard boxes, half-packed, are scattered around them. Their faces are pale and drawn, illuminated by the cold light of a phone screen. They don't speak to each other. The only thing of note in the room is the stark white paper taped to their front door, the eviction notice, a final invoice for their choices. They got nothing because, in the end, they valued nothing. And I am left with everything that matters. My dignity, my peace, and Eleanor's legacy shining brighter than ever.